South Africa is once again being forced to confront one of the most painful and unresolved chapters of its past, as fresh testimony at a judicial commission has reignited questions about justice, accountability, and the unfinished business of the truth and reconciliation process. At the center of this moment is Imtiaz Ahmed Kaji, the nephew of anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Dimol, whose death in police custody in 1971 remains one of the most haunting cases of apartheid-era brutality. Speaking before the commission, chaired by retired Justice Sisi Kambebe, Kaji delivered a deeply emotional and pointed message not only to the legal system but directly to President Cyril Ramaphosa. His call was clear: do not interfere with the law, but do not allow the system to continue failing victims. For more than 3 decades, Kaji has been pursuing justice for his uncle, whose death was initially ruled a suicide during apartheid, only for later findings to expose the truth of torture and state involvement. But despite these findings, full accountability has remained elusive, and now, decades later, families are still waiting, still watching, still reliving the trauma. According to Kaji, what is unfolding in the legal system today is not just delay, it is something far more damaging: a cycle of legal battles, procedural challenges, and repeated applications that continue to stall progress. These include recusal requests, technical objections, and what he described as legal sideshows that distract from the core issue of justice. For the families involved, the impact is profound. Each delay is not just a legal matter, it is emotional, psychological, a reopening of wounds that have never fully healed. Kaji made it clear that sitting through these proceedings, watching cases stall again and again, has a devastating effect on victims' families, many of whom have already waited decades for closure. But beyond the emotional weight of his testimony, there was a more serious and troubling claim. Kaji suggested that the failure to prosecute many of the outstanding cases linked to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission may not simply be the result of inefficiency or political hesitation. Instead, he pointed to the possibility of internal obstruction within the National Prosecuting Authority. This is a significant allegation because it shifts the focus from external political interference to internal institutional failure. For years, there has been speculation about why more than 300 TRC-related cases have not been successfully prosecuted. Some have blamed political pressure, others have pointed to lack of resources. But the idea that there may be deliberate obstruction within the system introduces a new and deeply concerning dimension. If true, it would suggest that the very institutions tasked with delivering justice may be contributing to its delay. This is why Kaji's appeal to the president is carefully framed. He is not calling for interference in legal processes. That would undermine the independence of the judiciary. Instead, he is calling for leadership, for intervention at a systemic level, for mechanisms that can unblock the process without compromising the rule of law. This raises a broader question: what is the role of political leadership in situations where legal processes are technically independent but practically stalled? President Ramaphosa has previously emphasized the importance of institutional independence and the rule of law. But moments like this test that principle, because independence without effectiveness can lead to paralysis, and for victims, that paralysis feels like injustice. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established with a clear purpose: to uncover the truth, to promote healing, and to create a foundation for justice in post-apartheid South Africa. While it succeeded in many areas, particularly in uncovering the scale and nature of past abuses, it also left behind unresolved cases that were meant to be pursued through the criminal justice system. That process, however, has been slow and in many instances incomplete. Now, decades later, the consequences of those delays are becoming more visible. Families are aging, witnesses are passing away, evidence becomes harder to access, and the possibility of achieving full justice becomes increasingly uncertain. This is why the current moment is so critical. It is not just about revisiting the past, it's about whether the system can still deliver on its promises. The commission, led by Justice Kambebe, is tasked with examining exactly these issues: why prosecutions have been delayed, what obstacles exist, and what can be done to address them. But commissions, by their nature, can only recommend, they cannot enforce, which means that the responsibility ultimately falls on institutions and leadership to act on those findings. For many South Africans, this issue goes beyond individual cases. It touches on fundamental questions about accountability, about whether justice is truly equal, and about whether the legacy of apartheid has been fully addressed. Gaji's testimony has brought these questions back into the national conversation, not through political rhetoric, but through lived experience, through decades of waiting, and through a demand that the system finally deliver. As the commission continues its work, attention will remain focused on what emerges. Will there be clear evidence explaining the delays? Will accountability be established? And most importantly, will there be meaningful action to move these cases forward? Because for the families involved, time is not an abstract concept, it is a reality they have been living with for decades, and the longer justice is delayed, the harder it becomes to achieve. This is not just about the past, it is about the present and the future of accountability in South Africa. And as the pressure builds, the question remains: can the system still deliver justice, or has the delay already changed what justice means?